Hi, everyone. I'm Carli.
And I'm Sophia.
And this is Away She Goes, a podcast from girls who travel.
Each episode will help you feed your wanderlust with travel tips, stories, inspiration, and more. Away she goes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Away She Goes. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, Megan of Cherish Tours. So before we get into today's episode, which is creating the perfect itinerary, Megan, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, telling our listeners a little bit about you and a little bit about your company, which is Cherish.
Yeah, of course. I am super excited to be here and to chat with you guys today about itinerary making. That's definitely one of my specialties, if not expertise. I used to do conference planning in my previous life, and that was a whole handful, and it really wasn't serving me. So I took that skill and combined it with the passion I have for travel. I've been to 35 countries in my life. So I am now leading tours with Cherish Tours, and I put together the itinerary and do all the things, and all the guests need to do is show up and enjoy. So each Cherish tour is exclusively for women and supports women in business, and so that supporting women in business part is what makes us special. We curate every itinerary to be geared towards women in business, staying at local accommodations, working with women tour guides, all of those beautiful things, so that when you show up for your vacation, you know that your tourism dollars are going to support women.
That is so cool. So
Yeah, that's great.
Let's dive right in to the topic, which is creating the perfect itinerary. So the first question would be, do I even need an itinerary?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think people love either one side or the other of that question. Some people are winging it and they're just showing up and enjoying, and then other people really need an itinerary to have a good time. So my answer maybe isn't directly saying yes or no. It's more like it depends. It depends on what your needs are for your trip and who you are as a person. You want to make sure that you're getting the most enjoyment out of what you are doing on your vacation, and you need to take yourself into consideration for that. I think the times that you really do need an itinerary is when you're in busier destinations that require advanced reservations. So making sure that you're not going to miss out on an activity or a place that you want to stay or something you want to visit simply because it's already booked.
That is a very good point. When I told my friend we were recording this episode just now, she told me, I expect you to come back with our perfect itinerary for going to London in a month.
Yes.
Megan and I spoke very briefly a couple of days ago, just to kind of touch base and everything before we recorded. And I shared with her that in all of my friend groups with my family, I'm kind of the go-to. If somebody needs an itinerary, they come to me. I have friends who have asked me to plan their honeymoon for them. Because it's something that I'm comfortable, I'm confident with. But, the reason that I'm the one that does it is because other people feel overwhelmed by it. They have this task in front of them and they're just like, how do I do this? So how can people do this or start this process without feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, I totally get that, especially if you're not a frequent traveler who has maybe gotten into the routine of being able to put an itinerary together for yourself. I think my biggest tip on not being overwhelmed is to start with the big pieces first. And what I mean by that, I think people's heads immediately go to big pieces. That must mean the destination, the hotel, those types of things. While those are big pieces, I think the things that you need to think about first is, what's your budget? What time of year are you even going? When are you available? And what type of traveler are you? And then some of your travel goals for the trip. So your itinerary will look very different depending on the answers to those questions. For example, like, what are the goals of your trip? Are you going to just relax and have a good time, just taking it easy? Or are your goals for the trip to see as much as possible because you're never going to go back to that place? And if your answer is, I want to relax, then your itinerary is going to look completely different than if your answer is, let me see and do all the things.
This reminds me so much. I went on 2 trips in December. I went to Bermuda at the beginning of December, and then I went to Denmark and Sweden at the end of December. And those 2 trips were very different for me. Bermuda was relaxation. Denmark and Sweden was, I'm here for 4 days. Let me see as much as possible. And I'm thinking back now to my itinerary, and Bermuda literally was day 1, resort, day 2, resort, day 3, resort, day 4, half day tour, rest of day, resort, day 5, resort. Like that was it. Whereas Denmark and Sweden was like, much more detailed. So I just thought it was interesting that I had 2 trips so close together that were exactly those 2 things.
Yeah. And it's very opposite. You want to make sure you answer those. What are my goals for my trip? Not only based on that spectrum, but also what are your weather expectations? What are your, potential skills that you have? Like if you're going to a Caribbean island, let's give that as an example, and your goals are to sit on the beach the whole time and be able to enjoy the weather. You don't want to go during hurricane season because then it's going to be raining nonstop and your goals will be completely defeated and you won't be able to enjoy the beach and enjoy the beautiful weather that the Caribbean islands tend to have. So some of those things just need to be flushed out before you even start putting things, day 1, do this, day 2, do this. You need to answer some of these bigger questions in order to know when you can go. That's actually a good time of year for you to go to these places, as well as like, what the heck is even going to go onto my itinerary?
And then circling back to like creating the itinerary, like how detailed should it be? Like, of course, then there's Carli with her, like, well, day 1, resort, day 2, resort, but like, how detailed would be, like, for example, also too detailed, like?
Yeah, I think that's also another really great question. And again, my answer skews both to like either side. It depends on who you are and what you're trying to do. For me, I would say my perfect itinerary for a relaxing vacation is to have minimally the hotel booked. But on the opposite side, if I'm doing like Carli's trip where I was going to Denmark and Sweden and I wanted to see all the things, then I would be making sure that I not only had the hotel booked, but I had the activities and tours booked that I wanted to do. And for me, and being a professional that plans itineraries for groups, I always build in downtime. And to answer your question, Sophia, about how busy is too busy for your itinerary, I think you really don't need to get into the nitty gritty of hour by hour unless it's a very, very short trip. And if you are doing hour by hour, because that's what you feel comfortable with and you're trying to accomplish as much as possible in your destination, I would make sure that you have built-in downtime, either a free evening or a free afternoon or any of those things, so that you're not feeling overwhelmed and that you need a vacation from the vacation you just took.
Yes. I know those trips.
Yeah.
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 So for Cherish, yeah, all of our tours, we have very busy days. For Alaska, for example, that's coming up in June, we have a day that we wake up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, go all the way down to the Kenai Peninsula and do a full 6-hour boat tour. And then afterwards have time to visit the city and don't get back to our accommodations until about 7 p.m. So it's a very long day. But the following day is our spa day. So we go to the spa and we do some relaxation. So it's all about balance so that your vacation can actually feel like a vacation. You do the things you want to do, but you build in the downtime and you build in the relaxation so you're not overwhelmed. And you just make sure that you have a little bit of both.
I'm gonna throw in a question in here that's not on the sheet, but Sophia, I know that you and I have both had this experience. Megan, I'm sure you have as well. But what happens what do you do? How do you get over, I guess, the guilt? I used to feel guilty if I needed to take a break instead of following my itinerary. Now I don't. It actually happened to me in Denmark. I didn't sleep well on the plane on the way there. I was trying to power through the first day and see everything, and I couldn't. And halfway through the first day, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to my Airbnb and I'm going to relax, and that's okay. But I think that's something that some people have trouble doing. It's something that, I'm here, I'm on this vacation. I need to be doing something every minute of every day. I need to follow my plan. So how do you find that, you personally or with others that you've worked with, how do you kind of reconcile those feelings of guilt of, oh, I'm letting myself down kind of a thing?
Yeah, I think that's a really amazing question to ask, especially for people who are maybe only able to visit the destination the one time in their life. I feel like I have a huge privilege to be able to visit places multiple times, and I like to encourage people to go back to the destination rather than just bookmarking it for the very and only time that you're going. But I also understand that that's a privilege and that some people are not able to, let's say, go back to Denmark more than one time, or even go from opposite ends of the world. From Europe, let's say you're going to Costa Rica, then it might be the one and only time you get to go. So those feelings are super valid. I would first say, like, validate those feelings, validate that you do want to see everything and you want to be able to experience all of the things that you possibly can. Totally valid, totally, an experience that is normal to be having. I think in reconciling it, it's more about just listening to your body and your own energy levels and just reminding yourself that you'll have a better time if you're actually enjoying the things you're doing. If you're sitting in a place where you're exhausted and grumpy, you're probably not going to enjoy the things on your itinerary anyways. And if you're not enjoying your itinerary, then what's the point, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what part of the world you are in. You still need rest. You still need food. You still need water. You still need to listen to the things that your body is telling you you actually need and want to do. And you can always adjust your itinerary to make sure that I make that point, since we're talking about how to make the perfect itinerary. You don't need your itinerary to be set in stone, literally carved out, and you can't redo anything when you're there. I would always make sure you're paying attention to any cancellation policies or places where you could potentially lose money. But other than that, be flexible with yourself. And even if, let's say, you had an afternoon experience planned where you were going to walk to the Louvre, you can do that tomorrow, or you can save it for the day after tomorrow. It's totally fine. I think it's really important first to pay attention to what your needs are so that you actually love doing the things that you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I felt like it would be good just to touch on that because I feel like there's so much pressure once you make an itinerary to stick to it religiously when, and people feel that pressure and that kind of, like I said, like that guilt of I'm not sticking to this.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people on the opposite side too can feel like they've missed out on something because they didn't know about it until they actually end up in their destination. And that's just poor prior planning, right? You also need to make sure that you've done your research and homework at least a little bit before you end up in a place. I've been definitely guilty of that when I'm doing my own personal travels. When I've just picked the hotel and I've picked the city, but I've looked nothing else up, then I get there and I'm like, oh, I'm going to miss out on this or this because I didn't even know it was here. So it's good to make sure that before you end up somewhere, you're looking up what there is to do and making a priority list that says, these are the top things that I know I really want to get to. And then you maybe have a second priority list or a lower priority list so that you can get rid of some of those feelings of guilt that you're having. You see the priority things first, make sure that you really want to make sure that you get to those. And then the lower priority things can be something you feel less guilty about, but more excited about if you do end up getting to them.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I think people think itineraries need to be Monday at 9 a.m. I'm doing this. At Tuesday at noon, I'm doing this. While that's a traditional itinerary and potentially good to have, Itineraries, I think for me, are more about making sure that you feel comfortable, you feel safe, and you're getting to the things you want to actually do. And so making a priority list or arranging things in a less like rigid time frame can be a more flexible way to allow yourself to see the things and do the things and feel comfortable and safe while not giving yourself so much rigidity and potential guilt for not following the exact hour by hour itinerary.
I think that's
I
great.
like that idea.
Yeah, I really like that too. Just kind of like ranking things almost.
I think that's how I'll approach our London itinerary.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
London is such a great example because London is such a huge city. And honestly, you could spend weeks on end still
I lived there
seeing
for a
things in
year and I
London.
still have missed out on so many things. I never walked the Millennium Bridge. Like,
Yeah, see, so it's just about, making those priorities, especially if you lived in London and you've already been there. Like, what things do you want to see again? What things do you want to do that you didn't get around to? Just answering some of those questions instead of being like, okay, 9 a.m., going to breakfast at XYZ restaurant. Great, but it's going to be better for your overall vacation to go to the things you really want to go to instead of forcing yourself to follow a hour by hour itinerary.
Yeah, I like that. And then having like the kind of like building blocks, just like, do I feel like going to the museum today or do I feel like going to the park? And then I really like the prioritizing.
Yeah, I like that too.
Especially because there's a lot of things, especially in London or Paris or some of the bigger cities, that are not paid tours. You're doing a lot of the experiencing on your own. You're walking there. You're going to see the Eiffel Tower. You're going to the Louvre. Or in London, like you said, you walk over the Millennium Bridge. It's not a dedicated, I have to be there at noon because I bought a ticket for it. So, it's really, you have to do both. I think depending on your destination, for example, in Costa Rica, it's a much more common thing to be buying a ticket for an adventure excursion that starts at a specific time. So if you don't want to do that every day, that's totally fine, but you're going to miss out on some of the things to do and things to see if you don't do any of that. So that's where I would say some of the hour planning needs to come back into your itinerary is for paid activities and tours that you don't want to miss, like zip lining, for example, if we're talking about Costa Rica.
Speaking of Costa Rica, I know you went with our good friend Jenny, who I know is listening. So hello, Jenny. I just want to say I heard so many good things about that trip. I saw the photos; they look beautiful. So I just wanted to comment on that. So now that we've got our kind of basic overview of, do I need an itinerary? What if I don't follow my itinerary? Can you kind of walk us through, like, if you have a kind of a blank slate in front of you, or you maybe have just a very vague idea of a destination or a time of year in front of you, how do you go through the process from start to finish? What are kind of the steps that you take to create an itinerary from the ground up?
Yeah, I actually would take one step back, and before you even have your destination, I consider weather and time of year first.
Okay.
A lot of people will just be like, oh, I want to go to, let's pick a really popular destination. I want to go to Alaska. We have that coming up in June, and Alaska is a really popular destination, and it seems pretty obvious because it's a very northern state. It's cold. So you have to consider the time of year you're going before you ever pick Alaska. Let's say you're only available to travel in January, then you don't want to go to Alaska.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah, so there's a ton of destinations around the world that are maybe not so obvious in that way. Thailand, Bali, a lot of Southeast Asia, the Southern Hemisphere is on a completely different season type. How do I say that? Season time than we are. So in the United States right now, it's spring, and it's sort of spring in the Southern Hemisphere, but their summer is our winter. So you just want to make sure before you pick your destination, you actually know what the weather is going to be like in the place you're going to, what season it is, what all of those items are so that it aligns with your expectations first. And then once you've gotten that figured out, then you can start building your itinerary. For me, it's the next biggest thing you have to consider is your budget. What do I want to spend? What is my affordability? That can actually determine the destination as well, because, for example, going to Switzerland is way more expensive than going to Mexico, for example. But let's say your dream destination is still Switzerland, that's fine, but you still should have a budget in mind anyways, so that you can start picking out your hotels, or if you need to stay in an Airbnb, or if you're even trying to be on the more budget side, staying at a hostel or a potential homestay, something like that, you need to have that budget in mind before you can start piecing things together. And budget is so important as well, because if you don't have an idea of what to spend, you're going to way overspend, and you're going to feel a little bit of that like travel guilt of why the heck did I even do this? And for me, cushioning your budget is really important too, because you're more than likely going to spend more than you're anticipating. So once you have your budget figured out, you can start booking some of these bigger items, your hotel, your accommodations, and the tours that we talked about, as far as those are the things that you actually need to have set beforehand. Some people are a lot more like free will than I am and don't even book their hotels before they go someplace. But
Oh no.
for me, yeah.
Oh no.
I have gotten that feedback, but that's just not how I travel. That's not how I would ever recommend, especially new travelers, to travel either. You have to pick your accommodations so that you feel comfortable and safe and you have somewhere to sleep at night, especially in popular destinations where hotels or Airbnbs or homestays could easily sell out or super increase in price as you start getting closer to the actual trip. So back to your framework of how to build a itinerary, Carly, that question, it's definitely, like I said, one, considering the time of year and weather of the place. Once you have that, picking your destination and being comfortable with it, then considering your budget and starting to book some of the bigger ticket items like your hotel, your accommodations, or your tours. And then once you have all of that figured out, depending on how, I don't want to say rigid, depending on how particular you'd like your schedule to be, then you can start piecing some of these things in. It's a great framework to start with. I'm staying in this city at this accommodations. Here's my priority list of the things I want to do. I'm staying for 5 days. You've determined how long you're actually going to be there for. Now you can start playing this like plug and play game, like piecing it together. You want to go see priority number 1 on day 1. You want to go see priority number 2 on day 2. And then you can fill in some of the other things as well. That's kind of how I would go about it and starting to put together an itinerary. And I think your itinerary looks really different when it's just for you or just for you and a significant other or a friend or someone that you love, in comparison to if it's for a larger group. If you have a larger group, I would definitely recommend either getting the support of a professional or having a bit more tailored itinerary that's more of these hour by hour, so that everyone knows what the expectations is, and building in that free time or downtime so everyone can still do things that they either want to do or get some of those relaxation pieces when you're a part of a bigger group.
I think this is all great advice for people who are looking to start. I actually have to make an itinerary later today, so for a trip I'm going on. So I'm definitely going to go the priority route rather than necessarily like hour by hour. I don't go as strict as hour by hour, but I definitely go day by day usually.
Yeah. And I think another thing is just like assessing what type of traveler you are And I think a lot of the work is done for you once you've actually picked your destination, especially if you've picked only one city like London or Paris within your destination. Where it starts to become more complex is when you're visiting multiple cities in a country. For example, you mentioned the trip we did in March with Jenny. Hi, Jenny. We went to 3 different cities within Costa Rica. And so that's when you need to start figuring out where you're staying in multiple places and the different things you want to do in multiple places. And all of that, for me, the biggest tip there is just making sure that you're doing advanced research to know where you want to go and what you want to do in each place, especially, people from the United States would totally resonate with this. Like Atlanta is an entirely different city than LA. So if you were doing a trip that went to both, you want to make sure that you're looking up the things to do in both places and not assuming that they're the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been to both. They're very different.
Itineraries can be as easy or complex as you want them to be. But once you've picked your destination and you've picked the places you want to go within that destination, a lot of the other pieces start to kind of fall into place on their own and with that research.
Perfect. And one last thing that we wanted to touch on, you've mentioned it kind of in passing as we've gone throughout this, is safety. So obviously we could take every effort and we can never fully guarantee that everything is ever going to be 100% safe, of course. But what are some steps that travelers can take when creating an itinerary to try to cover as many bases as possible of making this as safe and secure as we can hope to?
Yeah, I can speak from the perspective of being a woman, especially being a woman who has solo traveled and gone to many places on my own. So safety is obviously very important for anybody, but even more so important for a woman and a woman solo traveler, just to make sure that you really feel comfortable in all of the things that you're doing. So I've mentioned research several times, and I cannot emphasize more how important it is to do your research ahead of times. And in the days of the internet, like for even your accommodations, relying on reviews, photos, past guest experiences, or even reaching out to ask someone who's been to the place that you've been to, or is going to the place that you want to go. You can get their recommendations, where they stayed, what part of the city, what part of the country, so that you can start feeling more confident about your decisions. Safety also, before you even go to a destination, and checking the embassy recommendations, looking up. Here in the United States, we have travel recommendations to different countries around the world, and it updates pretty regularly. So if we recall, for example, Peru went into a bit of a civil outbreak earlier this year, end of last year. And you wouldn't have necessarily wanted to be in Peru at that time. Even if Machu Picchu is on the top of your bucket list, it probably would have been better during that time to reschedule or go at a different time. So just making sure that you're aware of some of those types of things, to make sure that you're not walking into a war zone or, a giant protest area or any of those things, civil unrest. Yeah. So just looking that up before even picking your destination. And then I would also say that as a woman, there's more and more options out there to be booking with female hosts, female guides around the world. There are even taxis now in many different places like New York City or India that only hire female drivers so that their female travelers can feel confident and comfortable getting into cars to their destination, to their hotel, whatever it is. And then let's see what else with safety. I think really above all else, my biggest recommendation with safety is to trust your gut, to trust your intuition. It will always tell you the right thing. And that's as you're planning your itinerary, as well as you're seeing your itinerary through in the place that you're in. If something feels uncomfy or feels unsafe, it's so important to listen to that and to either not book it, or if you get there and it's not what you expected, the money isn't worth staying there. Cancel and go somewhere else. Or, if your tour guide makes you feel uncomfortable, cut your tour short. It's totally okay. Your safety is so much more important than, doing the thing or making someone else feel, good about themselves.
I think that's great advice.
That's a nice wrap.
Yeah.
I think I'll add one more thing is when all else fails, especially if you're new to traveling, you can always rely on a professional or some of these really great Facebook groups that exist, like Girls Who Travel, so that you can ask recommendations that are personalized. And then with a professional, either on a small group tour like Cherish hosts or with a travel agent, you have someone that has done the research for you and done the itinerary planning for you so that you can feel safe.
Perfect last words.
I know, exactly.
The
That was
last
great.
words. So you maybe want to tell our listeners, well, the last word's already done, but where they can find you and Cherish online.
Yeah, that would be great. So Cherish is Go Cherish Tours on Instagram, as well as gocherishtours.com is our website. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn under the same name. So that's how you can find us and search for anything. We have some really incredible trips coming up. We have Alaska in June. We have this fall a Nordic getaway that goes to Denmark, the Faroe Islands, and Iceland. And then in October, we have the Panama trip. And Panama is an incredibly underrated destination. A lot of people want to go to Costa Rica, and you totally should, but you should also have Panama on your radar. We've launched our travel calendar for 2024 as well. So if you check out gocherishtours.com, you can actually start your travel fund to start saving for a trip in 2024. And your travel fund will help you earn rewards for those trips as well.
Perfect. And listeners, we will put links to the social media and the websites in the episode description so that you have a very easy time finding those. That's all for this episode. If you'd like more Away She Goes in your life, make sure to stop by girlswhotravel.org/podcast. That's where you can fill out a form if you're interested in being a guest on the show. You can also write to us at awayshegosgwt@gmail.com or leave us a message on our Google voicemail from any phone or computer at 1-563-503-6323. To follow our adventures, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Carli Sees the World. Carli is spelled Carli.
You can also follow me at Sophia AEZ, Sophia with a PH. Away She Goes is part of Girls Who Travel, a community dedicated to radically redefining travel to be inclusive, sustainable, and empowering. You can learn more about GWT, find travel tips and support, shop travel-themed items made by GWT members, and join our Facebook group with nearly 100,000 women all around the world at girlswhotravel.org. We can't wait to connect and explore with you. Away she goes.